Hey everyone, Troy Harris here. On this week's video newsletter, I'm going to be covering the SpaceX IPO and what exactly I feel it means for the reactions that humans are giving it at the moment. A bit of a look into the human psyche. I'm also going to be talking about Bitcoin's latest move down and why I see, once again, as I always see, why this is a huge buying opportunity for Bitcoin, especially if you are a long-term investor. I'll see you very soon. Welcome back to this week's podcast. I want to share with you my thoughts on what we saw in Bitcoin these last 7 days, with it having a major drop back to 61,000 US dollars, and what this actually means for the overall markets. Now, if we look at this as a play-by-play blow, if you want to say that way, we saw this happen over a period of days within the last kind of week or so that we saw it essentially takes steps down, where it hit a 61,000, bounced back to 64. It's kind of bouncing around this low 60,000 US dollar range. Now, just to be clear, and this is probably getting, people are probably getting sick of me saying this, but just to be clear, this is a very, very normal thing for Bitcoin to do. This is a very normal process for Bitcoin. And if you look at the prior 4-year cycles, we always see this pullback the year after we see a high in the cycle. So we saw the same thing happen in 2018 with a major pullback, 2022, and now in 2026, we're seeing a very similar trend. I feel like that the low actually isn't in yet for Bitcoin. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not going to maybe move back up to 70 or even 80,000 US dollars in the coming months, but I still feel like we could definitely go lower than 61,000 US dollars as we head to the back end of 2026. This would kind of play it in the exact same trend as what we saw in 2018 and 2022. Now, for me personally, this is a period of time where I'm really starting to look at the market in regards to dollar cost averaging back into Bitcoin again. This is something that I'll be looking at to do. Even considered potentially some of it this week when I saw it touch 61, but I'm definitely heading back into that area where I feel dollar cost averaging comes into play again. We're definitely going to be going through that same cycle that we saw 4 years prior and 4 years prior to that, and I don't see this changing at all. Anyone who's read my book, Crypto New Rich, I go into great detail about the 4-year cycle and how we kind of see this play out, and this seems to be playing to a T for Bitcoin once again. Now, there was some interesting news that come out during the week with a company, I believe it's pronounced Travala, which was actually a company where there's AI agents actually purchasing through USDC, purchasing travel packages. Now, this is super interesting, and another way where you kind of see the worlds of AI and crypto colliding, and this is something that is a super interesting thing that's come out, and it's certainly not going to be the first of the first and only of this kind of thing. I believe as we see AI progressing and we see AI getting much more smarter and knowledgeable and able to analyze things much better, much more analytical, we're going to see more of these kinds of things happening. Now, I wanted to kind of do a bit of a broader take this week as well on the overall, I guess you could say, state of the market and where this actually plays in the human psyche in regards to the AI take. So a lot of the news around this week as well was around SpaceX and the IPO there. Elon Musk not really explaining in great detail exactly is it going to be worth holding some Tesla stock because it'll go up in alignment with SpaceX, or what will be happening? Is it all going to go into SpaceX? No one really knows. Now, I guess when you're the world's richest man, you can do this. But that's one part here. But I feel like a lot of people are overanalyzing this particular play in the market. Now, regardless of what's going to happen, in my opinion, Elon Musk has hit a point in the psyche of other humans where it doesn't matter what he does now, whatever he touches is going to turn to gold. There's always going to be a huge bandwagon of supporters that he has. Love him or hate him, that's just how it is. Now, I've always said this, what choices do we have here? When we're talking about the world's richest man, you can either go and have a big cry on social media about, about how tough life is and how much you might not like Elon Musk, or you do what I always say to do, and is have a look into the markets and see where you can capitalize on this. So next week, I want to touch into a little bit more detail around the SpaceX IPO and the kind of the way to break that down. But for this week's episode, I just wanted to kind of share the psyche behind it, and what I feel humans are overall driven by, and ultimately you'll see this throughout history. We always are following some kind of leader or some kind of person that we feel has more power. Now, whether you like this or not, that's just what humans do. The majority of humans are followers, right? And when there's someone like an Elon Musk character and these kinds of things, they divide people. Donald Trump, they divide people. Vladimir Putin, right? These characters divide people, but people are always drawn to these leaders. Now, this is much more powerful, the Elon Musk move, because the guy is super smart, and he also has his hands in a lot of businesses. So it's going to be super interesting to see how this whole SpaceX play plays out over the coming weeks and months. But I'm going to be covering a bit more of that on next week's podcast. I just wanted to give you the overall view of where I believe things are at the moment. And there's not really much to really report on the gold side, so I'm going to really skim over that this week. It's still tracking steady. I'm still looking at this. It's a much more of a longer term play though. But Bitcoin is one that's always super interesting and way more interesting to me than gold. Even though I do have gold in my portfolio, Bitcoin is absolutely the much more interesting one, because in my opinion, we are heading absolutely into that buying area again. We're seeing a lot of fear in the news. You do see some really cool things pop up like Travala, like I mentioned before, but most of the Bitcoin and cryptocurrency news at the moment is very much doom and gloom, and that's the perfect time to be purchasing Bitcoin, in my opinion. So that wraps us up for another update for this week. Make sure that you do send in your emails. You can go to troyharris.com.au, submit your questions. We had a couple come in last week, which I'll be covering on next week's podcast as well. So make sure you submit them, and we will be getting them through. Other than that, we'll see you next week.